The weather's turning chilly, so I've decided to knit a new sweater, and it's a trendy seasonal one too. Not trendy like those multiple variations on plain beige sweaters I see a lot of folks knitting, though this does have a little bit of beige in it. I'm being targeted with my minimal use of beige. The sweater in question is the Nocturnal Jumper designed by Saskie Co, and I don't think I've ever gone into a project page on Ravelry and seen so many similarly colored sweaters before. I mean, seriously, there's a scary amount of similarity. I kind of get it. The colors are seasonal and representative. Orange background, black cats, pale moon, or generally the other way around with the trendy beige background, black cats and a pumpkin spice orange or candle yellow moon. And either way, it's a cute sweater. I mean, I like it. If I wasn't going to be doing it my way, I'd probably knit it the same way as everybody else. So I can see why folks would want to use those particular colors together. The sheer amount of clones makes me feel like they picked up the same sweater at a department store though, and well, that would be a bloody expensive one because hand knits aren't cheap once you add up the cost of materials plus labor. So on the one hand, I can see why, the heart wants what it wants, but there's also a matter of individuality. The nice thing about knitting your own sweater is that you can choose your own yarns and your own colors, so I'm taking it in a more Whimsigoth direction, I think. I lived through the 90s, which was like, 5 years ago? So it's not whimsical, mystical 90s fashion, it's just what Gen X goth hedge witches wore when we weren't in our club gear. Maybe with a tiny little sprinkling of Magic Pixie Dream Girl. So what I'm going to use is Lion Brand Woolies. It's an affordable yarn and it comes in a variety of colors, and this is important, I'll get to that in a bit. It also has actual wool content. Would I like the wool content to be more than 20%? Sure would. But I'm not going to sneeze at it though. I think it's 20%. What is it? Yep, whopping 20% wool, 80% acrylic. It took about a week to get the skeins I needed because Michaels gets only so many balls of yarn in each color and the dye lots are split up amongst the different stores. Dye lots are important because you can have 2 balls of the same colored yarn in your hand, and if the dye lots are different, you'll see a clear difference in the color. So the yarn in your left hand may be just a touch darker or lighter than the yarn in your right hand, and this becomes problematic when you're knitting the body of a sweater or a sleeve and find out halfway through that there's now a very distinct wide stripe in the middle of your tummy or your arm. Found that one out the hard way a few years back when I tried to knit a sweater for the husbeast from yarn bought at Michaels. The body and one sleeve were 2 or 3 different hues of blue. I wound up scrapping it and buying all one dye lot of Cascade 220 from a local yarn store. But back to this yarn. I had to visit 4 Michaels stores in Calgary to get the 9 balls of yarn I calculated for the main color, and that was annoying. I'm just glad that I had multiple shops in town that I could visit because there's some folks who either have only one store or they have to travel to another town or city to visit a single Michaels. So I sure hope your Michaels stores are bigger than ours, because at that point I'd just be ordering in from someplace like KnitPicks. What you spend in shipping is probably going to be similar to your gas expenses and lunch for the day and any other kind of entertainment that you're going to want to schedule being away from home for that long. Now, of course, I could have just visited one of the local yarn shops. A couple of the shops in town do bespoke hand paint dyeing, so it's very much out of my budget. One of the local stores I like to go to requires finding parking in a very trendy area with very little parking. And the last store that I know I could go to, I haven't visited since the pandemic. There's a reason why. I made a couple of videos a couple of years back now about making a hat, mittens, and neck warmer, and the experience is noted somewhere in those 2 videos if you're interested in the story. And that's not just me trying to get you to watch my old videos, it's just I don't feel like going into it. The fact is, Michaels is just a lot easier for me to get to, and the price isn't all that bad, and there's parking. Honestly, if I love the sweater that much, I'll happily go to an actual yarn store and buy real wool and make another one. No one says you can only have one cute sweater with the magic cats on the yoke. And who knows, maybe then I'll make it with the colors that everybody else is using, because hopefully that means that those colors are easy to find. So the colors I chose were Nightshade, Flint, and Antler. Going through the projects on Ravelry, I did see a handful of folks making a version of the sweater in darker colors, so that gave me the confidence to choose these colors. I'm looking at the dark blue for the body, the beige for the moon and the yoke, and the gray for the cats. I don't look good in a lot of yellows and oranges, hence the relatively neutral beige. Actually, it's kind of pinky, but just mildly. Obviously, I'm making this sweater because I wanted a new sweater, but I also wanted the project to be accessible to plus-size knitters who maybe wanted to make a popular pattern but were afraid the amount of yarn would break the budget or that the sweater wouldn't be in their size. And I know that as a plus-size person, I've let those factors hold me back. The yarn altogether was less than $100, I'd like to say. And that's for about 12 balls of yarn total. Michael's was having a sale, so I was able to pick up my yarn at 30% off. So if you're a knitter like me who is being held back by those sorts of things, here are some tips for you. Decide on the pattern. Ravelry is my go-to for finding new knitting patterns, so that's usually where I go. Figure out how much yarn you're going to need. If you're using big box yarn, maybe check Ravelry or other websites for the yardage/meterage and do some back of the envelope math. See what yarn has the colors you want. I would have loved to make this sweater in Patons? If it was Patons, why is there no Y after A? And if it's Patons, why does it only have one T? I'm confused. I would have loved to make this sweater in, we'll call it Patons, classic wool, but they just didn't have the colors. The price was comparable between Lion brand, Patons, and Michael's House brand Loops and Threads, which has a bougie 100% acrylic. Lion brand had the colors and some wool content, so in my opinion that makes it the better option. Then watch for sales and try to get all your yarn with matching colorways and dye lots to minimize having to do any silly tricks like alternating knitting from 2 balls of yarn at once. Hopefully that helps get you what you need to get started while staying within or under your budget. Speaking of which, I should probably stop yapping and get started if I want to have this sweater done by Halloween. We have progress. I don't know how much my camera picked up yesterday, but I swatched the other side, because of course this is Swatching and Starting. The other side is all strings. And if you hear any noises in the background, it's cats, because it's always cats around here. But yeah, so a bunch of string on the back side, but on the front side, and I don't know how much is getting picked up by the light, is my swatch. Now, Swatching and Starting, and I haven't blocked this, but this is almost exactly to gauge. So I'm not going to worry too much about my gauge on this. I have a feeling that if anything, it might turn out a little bit big, and since I like big sweaters, I don't really mind that all that much. When my grandmother was making sweaters for me, she used to make them to the actual measurements, and I was always telling her, could you please make it as though you made it for my brother? And she, I think, did that once. And it's the one sweater that I had that has lasted the longest. It's in the closet waiting for me to shrink a little bit because I've grown since I was like 14 years old, but it's the thought that counts, right? So after the swatch, I then cast on for the neck, and I did have to rip back the once because I had thought that you knit around after the cast on, after joining it, And unfortunately, no, what you have to do is start the alternating pattern with the main color and the first contrast color. And this is where we are after last night. We've got people coming over this evening, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to have time to work on this in the evening hours that are going to be filmable. Probably not, but at very least, I'll be able to work on this at some point over the course of the evening, and I will update you again with where we go from here. I think now it's the setup for the yoke. So depending on how much time I actually have to knit this evening, if we wind up doing any kind of socializing during our company coming over, so sort of sitting there and having the chance to knit without concentrating on anything else other than chatter, we'll see where I am next time I check in. Managed to make it through my setup rows, and last night I had actually started on the chart. I'd gotten a couple of rows in and realized I didn't like any of my increases. There's a whole bunch of increases in here, and it's going to get a lot worse because there's this really sharp, I guess, set of increases where like every second stitch you increase by 1 stitch. So it's 1, 2, increase, 1, 2, increase. And I had all these little holes all over the place because it doesn't specify what kind of make one you're supposed to do, whether that's a knit front and back, a left leaning increase, a right leaning increase, lifting up the bar in the middle of the stitch between the stitches and knitting through the front or the back. It just doesn't say. I went online and looked for any indication of what is a good increase for doing the yoke of a sweater. And it was suggested to do a left leaning increase where you knit into the left leg of a stitch that's not the one right on the row below, but the next row down. And so far, that seems to be working out well. So what I had done is when I got to that point where I decided that this doesn't look good, I ripped all the way back to the top of the initial ribbing. So I'm working on this for the second time. And so far it seems to be doing really well. I'm enjoying the fabric a lot more. It looks a lot more cohesive. It's kind of dark in here, and I'm almost thinking of going back into the recliner where I did my crazy quilted witch hat, just because I can put on my magnifying lamp if I need to and basically be able to see my stitches a little bit better, because this nightshade blue is really, really dark. It's almost black. I did wind up having to add on another cable. One of the things I'm liking about these Knit Pros, I think the needle I'm using is a Knit Pro Zing, and while every so often my joins on the interchangeables get a little loose, I am enjoying the fact that I can just bolt another wire onto it and it makes it a little bit longer. I might have to see if I can get even more cables for these things. Because, yeah, this is nice. I like it. And I have a feeling that if it comes down to the point where I need to just do like a sleeve, I can just use a smaller cable and just go all the way around. So, yay for that. I wasn't sure I was going to like the cable itself because it's kind of like the Chow Goos, some of the early Chow Goos, where they've got like the actual sort of strand of cable inside the plastic. I found that so hard to knit socks with on ChowGoo needles, particularly since I'm used to using Addi Turbos, which are just a plastic cable. The problem with the Addi Turbos is that they will take on a shape after a while, and sometimes you have to dunk them in hot water or your teacup to make the cable malleable again. There's a word for you. Whereas with ChowGoo, they just always seemed stiff. So doing magic loop with ChowGoos is a little awkward at times. Depends on the length of your cable. But with the Knit Pros, it seems to work out well. I think Knit Pro has another name either here in Canada or overseas in Europe. Either way, they're colorful, they're fun, they're adjustable. Kind of like them. I'm late to the whole interchangeable needle game because interchangeables have been so expensive for so long, and I managed to pick these up on sale, so that makes me happy. Anyhow, I'm gonna go back to work. I've got stuff to do. I am about halfway through the yoke. Let's see if I can get it to show up on camera. And I'm absolutely thrilled. I am absolutely thrilled. I've come to the conclusion that if I only get the sweater and the witch hat, which if you haven't already seen it, will be linked up here somewhere. If I only get the two of these things done this fall or this October, then I'll be a happy camper. A friend of mine asked how long I had been working on it, thinking that it had taken me a couple of weeks to get to, I think it was here, so at about this point. And I mentioned it had been a couple of days, and they were a bit surprised, but, you know, before I started sewing, this was what I did, was knit. That said, I'm not very good at stranded knitting. It's been a long time, I'm really rusty, everything's puckered, but I'm rather hoping that blocks out in the wash. We'll see. I am enjoying the pattern. I like the thickness of the sweater. I love the way that the floats are kind of padding it out. And so I'm looking forward to it being done so that I can wear it. I think it will be quite nice. And I think I'm almost at the stage where I don't even have to worry about magic looping any longer. And I think we're pretty much at the point where I can just start going around in circles. I've got another increase round coming up. So at that point, I definitely will just be going around in circles and it'll be fine. I had been considering taking out that join, but now I'm glad it's there. I'm looking forward to being able to, say, go to Crossroads Farmers Market and be able to wear my spooky little sweater and my witch hat with all the patches and just kind of live my best life. But the only thing that's been kind of holding me back from all of that is the weather being a little bit chillier. And I'm kind of hoping that we get a little bit more temperate autumn weather before it goes into the deep freeze. That said, with this sweater, I have a feeling I'm going to be pretty toasty. The husbeast dragged out my nice snuggly blanket, and it's been useful because it gets chilly in here. So I think I'm just going to curl back up on the sofa, do a little bit more knitting, and we'll see if we can get through the yoke and down into the body. This sweater's knitting up really quick. And I'm really enjoying it, so yay! I don't know about you guys, but from where I'm sitting, this almost looks like something that one of those heavy metal guys would have worn back in the 80s. So we've got a little problem here. Just very teeny problem, and that's the sweater is really neutral. It's really not colorful at all. And one of the things that kind of draws people to the sweater to begin with is the vibrant colors that are within it. I got a good look at this last night, and the blue is dark to the point of being almost black. The gray is a very neutral to cool blue. The bone color is again very neutral, so it's neutrals on neutrals on neutrals. And what that does is it just takes all of the fun and excitement out of this particular knit. So I got down to the start of the moons, I guess, of putting the moons in, and took a really hard look at it and thought to myself, it's really puckering. It's really neutral. Am I going to be happy wearing this when I'm done? And the honest answer was no. And that's taking a long, hard look at it. And I know that with YouTube spaces, there are a lot of folks who will just keep soldiering on, and I've done it myself, because the whole idea is you got to get this done in a week or two and then get on to the next project. And in my case, I'm taking a look at these projects and I'm thinking to myself, I want clothing and sweaters and so on that I am actually going to wear, that I'm not going to just make a whole bunch of things each week and then take a whole bunch of things to the thrift store because I didn't like it or it didn't fit properly or whatever. My whole idea is that I want clothes that fit me, that look good on me, that I like, so that you can do the same thing of not settling for second best or third best or rubbish. Because that's what's in stores these days. We've got plastic going into the landfill. We've got clothing that changes faster than the seasons. And considering I live in a place where you wait 15 minutes and the weather changes, that's quick. So I want this to actually be a sweater that I am going to wear. So I did a little planning last night and I thought to myself, how can I make this a sweater that will look good on me, that won't wash me out, that won't make me think it looks like a neutral blob or whatever? And I did a little planning. I just went into Google Sheets with a picture of the chart next to it, and I just redid the chart with my own colors in it. So and this morning I went back to Michael's and I picked up some new yarn. So I've got a nice burgundy that will go up near my neck. I've decided I don't particularly like the stripe, so I'm going to actually just do it as a solid. I'm not sure that I like how high the collar is, so I may do a crew collar of some sort, just putting it over. So I'm going to do that with this beautiful burgundy. And I've got a sort of spicy brown that will look quite nice. And I've got some orange. And what I'm going to do is change up the yoke so that we've got some autumn leaf color coming in here, because it's the one time of year where you can actually blend a burgundy, an orange, and a brown and have it come out absolutely wonderful, because those are the colors of the leaves. I don't particularly look good in orange or in brown. I look better in burgundy. So I'm going to actually make that the color that goes up against my face. And then underneath that, in this sort of area, the other side of the zigzag, I think I'm going to go for the brown. These little motifs that are inside, I'm just going to turn them into... What am I going to do with those? Those, I think, are going to be a mixture of this and the bone color. And then when we get down into the ring that goes around, I think that's going to be bone. And I think this is actually a little floral motif that kind of gets lost in all the neutral. I'm thinking I'm going to combine these two. And allow it to have a little bit of an autumnal feel before the neutral bone color goes into the navy. And that way we can go from autumn to twilight or autumn to midnight, and we'll have our gray cats on the bone background for the moon. And that should hopefully liven things up a little bit without being too garish. Give it a little bit of color without being too minimalist or too maximalist. At any rate, I'm going to throw it on the needles and see what I like about it, whether it's going to work, and I'll check back with you in just a little while. Well, at least as long as it takes for me to get there. I probably wouldn't have figured this out if I hadn't knit this far, because, you know, you're not really going to see the bigger picture until you actually can see the bigger picture. And right now I can actually see the blue in this blue yarn, but it's still rather neutral. It and the gray just sort of leach the color off of each other. So I'm thinking that the spicier colors and the burgundy are going to really help liven things up and make it look a whole lot nicer. And I apologize if I look like I'm looking off to the side. The little monitor that my camera has that swings out from the back is over there. So it allows me to see what I'm pointing at, so it doesn't look like I'm just, you know, touching myself, as the song might say. Anyhow, I'm going to get back to work. I think I'll have lunch first, but I'm going to get back to work and we'll see where I am in the next day or two. I'll check back with it. I'll check back with you before then, I'm sure. Okay. I'm almost caught back up to where I was when I decided to restart with actual color in the sweater. Most of this color was planned for. I have made a few changes on the fly. So for instance, the burgundy up here, which I do rather like and is going to look nice around my neck, was supposed to carry down into here. The white was supposed to be in the background on this lower bit, or was it supposed to be white? Either way, things were supposed to be a little bit different over in here. Instead, what I decided to do is go high contrast with the antler color and the orange on the dark background. And that way, when we get down to the moons, which I've just started in here, it's a little less of, you know, having just a line to separate everything the way it has been here. So I'm rather liking that. But if I want to continue with the antler color, I'm running low. So what that means is I'm going to have to start pulling this back now. And I had kind of wanted to keep it intact as long as possible to kind of show what my knitting was like before and after. But I think I'm just going to start pulling it back so that I can cannibalize it for the color. It is nice, but the quality of my stitches has definitely changed. And the fabric itself feels a lot different for it. When I was working on the very neutral sweater, I used my usual method of carrying my yarn in my right hand and continental in the left. And what I wound up doing, and I'm not sure whether the B-roll is going to be able to show it, is I switched to basically carrying under my fingers. So usually this is how I would be handling my yarn. So don't want to lose that. So if I was tensioning, that would be how I would tension and back and forth. So this is how I lever knit. Thing is that this really does need me to be able to change my tension on the fly. So holding like this and just rocking back and forth with a simple lever motion works. And this is the way that I used to knit before I learned pretty much the Yarn Harlot style of lever knitting. As it is, I'm probably going to have to knit back a little bit. I'm thinking I'm going to need to put in some ladder back jacquard bits so that some of these long runs of color, I don't have to try and catch the floats in the back on light and dark colored stuff. I think the ladder back jacquard, which I'm kind of doing in here, will carry the floats up the back rather than possibly showing through the stitches. The colors really amuse me. And I think part of that is because once I started getting into the brown and the orange, it started reminding me of Chesterfields of the 1980s. It's giving me 1980s sofa. If you're Gen X or older, you may recall a certain kind of brown sofa or shades of brown sofa or brown floral sofa, or there's a kind of pastoral scene done in brown velour on a sofa. Like, brown sofas were a big thing in the 1980s, and there's a very particular style of sofa that I bet you anything in the comments I can get a bunch of people going, I remember that sofa, or I had that sofa, or my grandmother had that sofa, or my best friend had that sofa. In this case, one of my oldest friends, her parents had that sofa set. Sofa and I think 2 chairs. And if she's watching, she is free to update me on that, because that was the quintessential 1980s living room set, or at least rec room set. And I can remember many hours watching TV or movies in their living room behind my grandparents' house on that brown sofa. But that's what this is giving me, is it's giving me 1970s, 1980s decor, what with the orange and brown and burgundy together. The only thing that I'm missing here is avocado green. And that would put me square in the 1970s. What's kind of bringing me into the 80s is a little bit more of the burgundy and the blue and white. Kind of reminds me of some Corning wear, I think. So yeah, it's a very 80s sweater so far. It's going to look very interesting. And this is one of the reasons why I don't do the Rachel Maxey Brown stuff. It just reminds me of the 1970s. I'm sure you've probably noticed that the scenery has not changed very much in the past little while, and I probably could go sit on the other side of the room where there's sun, but I am a creature of twilight and dimness, and I kind of like my shadowy corner of the living room. Thing is, I remember I planned to do this sweater well before Breathing Yarn Isabella put out their video at the beginning of this month about their Nocturnal Jumper experience. And I probably should have paid attention when they were talking about how getting through the yoke was a slog, because I'm having the exact same experience. Once you get past this stuff here, it becomes a whole lot harder because you're having to juggle. And right now, all I want to do is get past those freaking black cats. I mean, I like cats. I love cats. I have 2 of them. One of them's sleeping in the chair right across from me. The other one, I have no idea where she's gotten to, but chances are, chances are pretty good that when I get into position to knit, they will appear and decide that they want to sit on my lap. So right now I'm thinking getting past the cats against the moon is going to be my major thing. And once I can get that done, hopefully the solid blue for the rest of the sweater will go fairly quickly. That's my hope. Because I'd kind of like to do something else for a while. And if I was to stop working on this to say, go make another pair of pants, which I probably will need to do for wintertime, or to make a new shirt, which I want to do because that's on my little list of things to do and it would be nice to have for fall, or to make a jacket because I need a jacket that will keep me warm out there because the weather's getting chilly. And Twig and Tail has just released 2 new jackets. Would be nice to do, but I'm knitting a sweater. So next time I knit a sweater, I'm hopefully going to do that in the evenings after I've worked on everything else. And hopefully that'll be like a extra video in a month rather than the only video in a month. Here's hoping that we can get this done. I guess back to work. We're at the Monday before Halloween, so Halloween is Friday. I think I've got about 2 days to finish the sweater and get a video edited if I want this up by Halloween. Might not happen. But the good news is I was up pretty late last night because I finished the yoke. I am very pleased with this. It does look like it's a little puckery in places, but for the most part, it looks good. And I'm happy with that. I have a feeling it's going to wear in or block out. The fabric is really thick. This is going to be a really warm sweater, at least up around the chest. And that's good because that's mostly where I get cold, is up around my shoulders. So that's going to look really nice, and it looks as though it's going to fit really well. I haven't taken it off the needles or put on the little cable so that I can try it on, but I'm pretty sure this is going to fit. Actually, I'm really sure it's going to fit. The hard part's going to be making sure it gets around my stomach, and so at that point I'm probably going to have to put it onto a cable and try it on and make sure that I'm putting in enough ease for myself. The main problem I have had, and I've got a ball of yarn running around here, the main problem I've had has been cats because cats love yarn, at least my 2 do. So anytime I would turn my back, I'd have the cream-colored cat going after my yarn and snapping it. She is alarmingly fast at how fast she can bite through a piece of yarn. So, no leaving the sweater unattended if I have to go into the kitchen to get another cup of tea or something. Oh, hello. She's back. She's back. Hi. That's it. I am hoping that the rest of the sweater goes relatively quickly now that I'm no longer having to do the full expanse of the bust and shoulders at the same time. Next step appears to be separating off the shoulders for the sleeves. and then working around the torso. So that sounds good. After that, it's doing the sleeves and finishing up. So we'll see how long that takes. So I think I'm gonna get back to work on this. We'll see how far I can get, and hopefully this will fly a little bit faster. Well, we blew right past Halloween. The last time I checked in with you, I think it was a couple of days before Halloween, and I was furiously knitting along on the sweater. And it's now about 2/3 of the way through November. Things kind of got busy at the beginning of November, and I had to put the sweater aside, or at least just work on it in the evenings. And it was quite the slog getting from the end, the end of the color work down here. So I'm about ready to start on the hem. This is all of the lightest color of contrast that I've got. And it's the most neutral one, so I could use it on the blue with no problems and not worry about anything vibrating too hard against the blue like the burgundy might. And I think because I used so many colors in the yoke, instead of doing the contrast ribbing around the hem and the sleeves, I'm just going to do a knit one, purl one hem and cuffs. Because I'm thinking, for starters, that I've got enough of the blue yarn to be able to do that. Most definitely. The other thing is that it'll leave a nice line all the way from the bottom of the yoke to the hem and bottom of the yoke to the cuffs without having any kind of stopping points. And as a plus size person, not having anything that sort of chops your body off and makes you look a little bit rounder or more squat is usually a good thing. So what that will do is it will hopefully lengthen my body and make me look a little bit slimmer, whether or not I actually am. I know that a lot of people consider it Sleeve Island, and I've been, I guess, sitting on the docks of getting to the hem. But whether you consider them Sleeve Island or Sleevels, I knit a lot of tubes anyways. I like to knit socks. So worsted weight tubes probably aren't going to take as much time as knitting a sock. Yay! So we'll see how long that takes. Picking up the stitches is probably going to be a pain in the butt. But we'll get through it. We'll get through it the best that we can. Sleeve number 1 is done. Actually, technically it's sleeve number 2, and sleeve number 3 is cast on. And if you're wondering why sleeve number 1 is actually sleeve number 2, it's because I actually got all the way to the cuff, realized it was far too long for my wrist, ripped it back, did a little math, and here we are. We are all done, down to the cuff. There are other things I could be doing right now if only I hadn't had to rip that back, but it looks better, it fits better, and looks really nice. I'm enjoying the tubular bind off on the ends of the sleeves. There's a couple of strangely thin spots where I joined my yarn, so I'll probably just go back over that and reinforce those areas. Not a big deal, I've got plenty of yarn left. I think I've hit that point where I want to stop working on this and actually wear it. Mostly because it's gotten so chilly over the past couple of months that in the evening time it feels like all of the cold air in the house just sort of goes down that set of stairs and hits me on the back of the neck. So it would be nice to wrap up in a nice sweater and maybe knit myself a hood or something. I saw that there's one by Gudrun Johnston that would be really nice because it looks a lot like a medieval hood. And I made a medieval hood a few years back now. And I actually wear it quite a lot, mostly when I'm shoveling the walks. It's really nice and warm for that. And I actually just put it away not too long ago because I was out shoveling the walks. So it would be nice to have something in a somewhat lightweight wool that I could actually just sort of put on in the evenings and cozy down in while wearing my nice warm sweater, because with the amount of wool around that stranded knitting, this thing's going to be nice and warm. And just start getting cozy for the winter because we have hit that spot. Anyhow, I'm going to get working on this and hopefully get it finished today. Hopefully. If not today, maybe tomorrow. So that hopefully I can get this video done and out to you guys. I just realized that I'm about halfway through my cuff and I'm using the wrong ribbing pattern. Instead of knit 1 purl 1, it's knit 2 purl 2.
How far back do you need to go? Like how many hours?
Probably about a half an hour, but what I'm considering doing is dropping the stitch down to where it needs to be.
And just hoping nobody notices?
And laddering back up in the opposite direction.
Okay. We will assume that I have any idea what you're talking about. So if that is the thing that will work, yay!
Yay!
Otherwise, you're just like there's a problem with the dilithium crystals and we're going warp factor 13 backwards and, you know, there's a Borg in the outhouse.
There could be a Borg in the outhouse.
Okay.
Had to move one of the cat beds out of the way, so the little terrors will likely be somewhat active while we're doing the wrap up, because they know that when the camera's on, they can get my attention if they make noise or climb things they know that they shouldn't. So I'll try to keep this brief for both your sake and mine. Possibly theirs as well. They're up there at the moment. That could change in a second. It took just over 2 months, but the sweater's fantastic. I finished it last night and I'm going to be editing all day today, so I'm definitely going to be snug as a bug in a rug while I do so. The husbeast has already come downstairs to adjust the temperature because he was freezing his butt off upstairs and I haven't felt it at all. So sweater works. It does its job. We're going to be putting up the Christmas tree soon, usually right here, and we generally do so around the beginning of December, so I'll get a couple more days of post-Halloween spookiness while shoveling snow, because it's been snowy this year. I love the changes that I made to the color scheme. If you've been keeping up with my stash busting and organizing videos, I came across quite a few Lopi books. This has me excited to give it a try. Or maybe Fair Isle. Fair Isle has shorter floats. The one thing I don't like about the sweater is the long float lengths, particularly in the design element that first caught my eye, the cats. Catching the floats just shows through the front. I used ladderback jacquard for the most part, but even then it looks like there's some puckering, despite trying to leave plenty of room for those floats. So I'm hoping some of the puckering blocks out, but if it doesn't, good first attempt. The neckline was always going to be an issue because I don't like a lot of things around my neck. So crew neck, I keep adjusting it. If it had been the tall cowl neck, I'd probably still be pulling it down quite often. The ribbing on one sleeve is a little wonky from going on autopilot and starting out as knit 2, purl 2 before dropping the stitches down and correcting them. Again, if it doesn't block out, it's just some added character for the sweater. And honestly, I don't care that it looks handmade. That's the charm of hand knit sweaters for me. They look like someone spent the time to make the thing. And I really don't understand why so many folks want their knits to look like they were store-bought. Store-bought to me doesn't mean value. It means it was either whipped out on an industrial machine or someone was paid far too little to produce it. Maybe both at the same time. So cherish your hand knits. I can already see places where the cats have pulled a couple of the stitches. Nothing that can't be fixed. I might attempt the original color scheme further down the line, maybe as a cardigan. We'll see if I ever find the time for it. I definitely will have to stash up to do it. I don't really think that I can count this as a stash busting project, as I started it before I made the decision to consciously work on knitting down the stash and had to stash up for the experience, but being finished means I now have time to work on other projects. There is another sweater around here. In here, because I ran out of project bags, which now isn't a problem because the big project bag is no longer holding this. I forgot to add it to my UFO pile. It's a plain step-by-step sweater, I believe by Florence Miller, in one variety of car and cake or another. I started it back in the spring. Let's see. Caron Blossom Cakes in Rose. So I'll definitely be getting back to work on it sooner rather than later. Before I started this sweater, I'd picked this up yet again and finished the yoke. So it's ready for the one last row of knitting plain before separating off for the sleeves and the body. So other than that, I've noticed that my favorite spot on the sofa gets a mite chilly at times, particularly on the back of my neck, so I've got some ideas about that, possibly involving some cashmere that's been sitting in my stash for a few years waiting for the right project. I'm trying to decide what I want to sew this month. The husbeast suggested revisiting the annual doomed Christmas dresses that I've attempted and try to make one that's not so doomed. It's a thought. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm going to see if I can go find that cashmere. And maybe some lunch because I haven't eaten today. And yes, at some point I probably should get a haircut.